We're going inside the world of high stakes law enforcement, drug prosecutions, and the true stories behind America's justice system. We're talking about a gripping memoir. It is called Law and Disorder: How a Kid from the Bronx Became America's Top Drug Prosecutor. You were part of the team that transformed New York City. You took it out of the dark ages where you were afraid to go down the street, where you were afraid to go into certain parks, where you were scared to go into certain neighborhoods, and opened it up to where families, working people, professionals could all enjoy it. That came through precise, targeted prosecution of the right parties. Am I right?
You are absolutely correct. I mean, one of the big factors, which I write about in the book, is the dismantling of the drug gangs that were so involved in New York City, which terrorized housing projects where people were afraid to come out of their apartments, send their kids to school, walk in the streets. It was a terrible situation. But, working with the mayor, who at that time was Rudy Giuliani, working with Police Commissioner Bill Bratton, and working with the Drug Enforcement Administration, we were able to knock out these gangs and also knock out the drug gangs that were importing the drugs from Colombia and from Mexico and other areas. I mean, I was involved in some of the biggest seizures in New York City history, including the seizure of 2 tons of cocaine that came in from Mexico through Texas. We were also involved in the seizure of 1,500 kilos that came in by boat from Ecuador that started in Colombia. So we make some tremendous seizures. I write about all these cases and seizures that occurred in the book. And I also write about the criminal justice system because I don't think people really understand what goes on in the criminal justice system, Logan. I think, they see a show like Law and Order and they think that's the way it happens and cases are solved in 52 minutes. That's not the case. Some of these investigations go on for months and they involve wiretaps and search warrants and informants and undercover officers. And I detail all this in the book and try to give the reader an inside view of really what is happening in the criminal justice system and how things are done. And I also write about an issue about the opioid crisis, which you mentioned, which has taken over, 100,000 lives a year. And I also talk about legalization of drugs, and I write quite a bit about that and the supposed war on drugs.
Yeah. We've come 180 degrees from when Rudy Giuliani was mayor. I mean, he and Bratton had the broken windows theory of policing, where you crack down on the small crimes before they become big crimes. Right now, it seems we're ignoring even big crimes. I mean, people are assaulting police officers, are engaged in deadly assaults on strap hangers, and they're cut loose by judges.
Yeah.
What kind of insanity is going on right now?
I think, and I write about it in the book, about the return to the bad old days. I think we took our foot off the pedal. We loosened up because things had become so good. I mean, New York was transformed. In the 70s and 80s, you had the peep shows and all the sex incidents going on 42nd Street and Times Square. And then 20 years later, you had Disney there. Unfortunately, things are going back. We let our foot off the pedal. We have to come back and toughen up. And police officers are afraid to make arrests because they're afraid that they're going to be sued now for an incident. So it's really a tough situation. I think we got to go back to what we did in the early 90s to try to restore law and order in the city and throughout this country where you have a real crime problem again.
It's amazing how short our memories are. We just assume like, oh, New York's safe. It's the safest, largest city in America. It wasn't always that way. You were afraid to go to Coney Island. You were afraid to live in Brooklyn. Now Brooklyn is like a suburb, booming with yuppies and so forth. But it wasn't always that way. But it's because of people like you and Bratton and Giuliani that made the changes that were needed and prosecuted the animals who needed to be put behind bars. I mean, there's a reality in this world that people choose to ignore, and that is there is true evil out there. There is true greed out there. And if you don't deal with it, it will bite you in the butt.
You're right, Logan. One of the cases I wrote about was a juvenile that I tried, a 15-year-old who had committed 2 murders on the subway, had robbed people and tried to shoot a motorman. and he was 15 years old, and I convicted him. It changed the law in New York. So now that individuals 13, 14, and 15-year-old can actually be prosecuted for murder and other serious crimes. And the law has become so effective that it's been taken up by other states, and it's been used now throughout the country. And in fact, we recently saw it in some of these school shootings by young, 15-year-olds who are now being prosecuted as adults for the shootings that have occurred in schools and in other areas. So,
And that
yes.
was a real tragedy and a travesty of justice when these people at 13, 14, 15 years old had the body of a man, would go out and create a heinous crime and then be in the juvenile system till they're 18 or maybe 21 and then cut loose.
Yeah, some of you raised a very good point. What I found in my career is that there are some people that cannot be rehabilitated, that they have to be warehoused for the protection of society. And, we see people who get arrested who commit murders, and you look at their rap sheet and they have 30, 40 cases on there, arrests on there. I mean, that should never have come to that. And we really have to take a close look and a hard look at these hardened criminals and who we put back out on the streets and then commit crimes again. It's a tough situation. And I write about all this in the book about, my career, the stories that I had, the cases that I handled, the famous people that I met, Judge Judy Harrison Ford, even the man who captured Adolf Eichmann, which is a fascinating individual, and I write about him in the book as well. So
Tell us about the man who captured Adolf Eichmann. That is a story that is too good to pass
he's
up.
a fascinating individual, and I met him. He passed away about 15 years ago. His name was Peter Malkin,
Mhm.
and Peter captured Eichmann and was a member of the Mossad, which is really the Israeli Secret Service and CIA and so forth. And he actually became an acquaintance of mine. If you saw him, he looked like a little old man who was in his 60s, and you didn't think this guy could hurt a fly, but yet he captured Eichmann, and he actually helped us some big drug cases because he had all these connections in South America and through Israel. And as a result of him, we became friends, and he actually was still working, and we made a lot of big drug busts because of Peter's cooperation. But if you saw this guy, you just would say, he's the guy who captured Adolf Eichmann. You would you think he's a little old grandfather, but
Right.
fascinating figure.
Amazing, amazing. And that's in your book, something that I know our readers and our viewers will want to read more about. Let's talk a little bit about drug legalization. There are dispensaries and marijuana shops now all over the place. I think it sends a bad message to people because they kind of lump all drugs together. If marijuana is okay, then maybe cocaine's okay, and maybe dope is okay. And, do you agree?
I absolutely agree because I think the legalizing marijuana and saying anyone can buy it sends a bad message because you're right. The next step is you go up to something harder. You go up to cocaine and then you go into opioids. And one of the issues, one of the big problems we've had is about legalization is we've actually had a legal drug that has caused hundreds of thousands of deaths, opioids. And the problem is that those were legal. They were given by physicians. They wrote hundreds of thousands, millions of prescriptions for people to take opioids. People got addicted. People died. That's a legal drug,
Yeah.
and we have to do something about that. And now, of course, fentanyl, which has become a terrible drug. I mean, just the smallest amount can kill you, and we see people dying all over the place because of fentanyl. And I talk about, this in the book. I have my last chapter where I talk about the dangers of legalization of drugs. Because if you legalize drugs, do you legalize all drugs? Do you legalize heroin? Do you legalize cocaine? Do you legalize fentanyl? And if you legalize that, what about age limits? If can you say a 15-year-old can buy it? Because if a 15-year-old can't, you're going to create a black market, and he's going to get those drugs.
Right.
So it's really we got to really deal with this issue and get our hands on it. None of the politicians have talked about legalization of drugs.
Well,
Nobody
there's a
is,
lot of money in it for the states. Unfortunately,
oh,
they've
yeah,
turned to it like gambling. They turned to it's amazing how something is a vice crime until the state embraces it.
yes. And
You
because
know,
they're making money on taxes and
yeah.
millions of dollars, which can be used for it, and through these dispensaries. But I don't think we realize the harm that it creates. And I think we really have to get our hands on this, Logan, and deal with it.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, thousands of people are dying in this country because of addiction to painkillers like opioids. And we got to do something about it.
You had quite an honor bestowed upon you in your career. You were appointed special narcotics prosecutor by all five New York City DAs. That's unheard of. I'm sure it was unprecedented at the time. It might be unprecedented ever since.
Yeah.
Tell us what that was like.
Well, special narcotics was created 50 years ago by New York because of the heroin problem that they created. It is the only office in the country dedicated solely to the investigation and prosecution of narcotics cases, where a district attorney has only jurisdiction in one county. I have jurisdiction or had jurisdiction in all five counties of New York because drugs are fluid. It's not like a robbery that takes place let's say, in Manhattan. Drugs come in through, let's say, Washington Heights, and they're distributed throughout the city and sometimes throughout the country.
Mhm.
And the cases that I handle, which of course led to this 2-ton seizure and another 1,500 seizure, uh, was caused by our jurisdiction, our relationship with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I mean, we were a New York office, but we did cases that took place in Colombia and all over the world because the drugs were coming in. I mean, you had from East Asia, from Afghanistan, you had heroin coming in from there, cocaine coming in from Colombia and Mexico. So we dealt with all these. We led the nation when I was there on wiretaps. We led the nation in search warrants on drug cases. And we handled, which is hard to believe, an office with about 80 to 90 assistants, over 7,000 indictments a year
Wow.
involving drugs. That's unprecedented. And we talk about it, how we had to handle all this in the book. And I think the reader will get a real understanding of the drug trade and what goes on and the whole criminal justice system. Because I had 25 years of experience. I saw it all. I witnessed it all. I was there when decisions had to be made and how they
Mhm.
were made and how sentencing we decided on appropriate sentences. And that's really what I wrote about, which was cathartic. I wrote
Yeah.
about what I had seen for 25 years, and it was something that took me 2.5 years to do.
Well, you were on the front lines of an epic battle that was successful. So writing about it was a great thing to do. I think Dick Wolf has had a headlock on Hollywood for too long.
Yeah.
I think instead of Law and Order, we need Law and Disorder be turned into a film or a TV series. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea because there are so many stories to be told about dealing with these drug gangs and their effect on the citizens of New York and how really drug cases are made. I mean, a robbery case, it's simple. Somebody gets arrested, somebody commits a robbery, he gets arrested, he's tried, case is over. Drug cases, especially investigations, can go on for months and involve undercovers really risking their lives, dealing with the mafia, dealing with the cartels. And I talk about it in the book, but it's fascinating the courage that these people had to do what they did to persuade somebody to send 2 tons of cocaine to New York,
Yeah.
uh, knowing that if they're caught, they're dead. Not only dead, they're going to be tortured. And it's just a fascinating story. And there's so many stories to be told. I think you're right. It
Yeah.
would be a great series to do because of so many stories and the law enforcement agencies that are involved and the prosecutors who work months to build these cases through informants and wiretaps and search warrants and surveillance. It's just a fascinating story.